What if everything you knew about American towns was wrong? These weren't just quiet places fading away. They were vibrant communities, suddenly cut down. Whole towns gone, often without a single warning. The reasons aren't simple accidents. They reveal a darker story about how fragile success truly is. So when you hear the words ghost town, what comes to mind? Probably an old Western movie, right? Tumbleweeds blowing down a dusty main street, abandoned saloons. And you're not totally wrong. A lot of these places were born from that classic American boom. A gold rush or a silver strike would pop up, and suddenly a city of 10, even 25,000 people would appear out of nowhere. But when the mines ran dry, the people just left. That's the simple story we all know. But it's not always that simple. Sometimes a town doesn't just fade away, it gets erased. We're talking about places wiped out by devastating floods, or man-made mistakes that poisoned the ground itself. Imagine a town sitting on top of an underground fire that's been burning since the 1960s, one that could keep burning for another 1,000 years. That's the kind of story we're getting into. Today, we're looking at 10 American towns that vanished. These aren't just tales of bad luck. They're warnings about what happens when the one thing holding a community together is suddenly ripped away. What if? Number 1. Centralia. This town in Pennsylvania is sitting on top of an underground inferno, and it's been burning since 1962. It all started with a simple, almost unbelievable mistake. A routine trash burn in an old mine pit accidentally lit a massive coal seam on fire. And that fire has never gone out. For decades, the people who stayed had to live with the consequences. Deadly carbon monoxide gas leaked into their homes. The ground would suddenly split open, creating giant sinkholes without any warning. Eventually, a town of nearly 3,000 people shrank to fewer than a dozen. In 2013, the last few residents reached a deal allowing them to live out their lives there. And to give you an idea of the scale, experts believe that fire has enough fuel to keep burning for another 1,000 years. But a disaster doesn't always take decades to unfold. Sometimes, a town is erased in a matter of hours. Number 2. Pichère. Imagine a town built on a treasure that turned out to be pure poison. That's the story of Pichère, Oklahoma. For decades, it was one of America's biggest sources of lead and zinc, metals that were essential for fighting both world wars. But the mining companies left behind literal mountains of toxic waste that towered over the town. This poison seeped into the water, the soil, and the air. But that was only half the problem. Decades of digging had turned the ground underneath into a hollowed-out honeycomb. The town was literally collapsing in on itself, with giant sinkholes opening up without any warning. Eventually, the federal government had no choice. They declared Pichère a toxic wasteland, bought every last property, and told everyone to get out. Pichère was destroyed by the very industry that built it. But sometimes, a town doesn't need an environmental disaster to die. Sometimes, all it takes is for the world to simply move on. Number 3. Times Beach. This wasn't a mining town sitting on a toxic secret. It was a normal, quiet suburb in Missouri. But a simple solution to an everyday problem would end up wiping it off the map. The town had a lot of dirt roads, and in the early 70s, they hired a guy to spray them with oil to keep the dust down. It seemed like a cheap, easy fix. The problem was, the waste oil he used was secretly mixed with dioxin, one of the deadliest chemicals humans have ever created. For years, nobody knew. Kids played on those streets. Life went on. Then, a massive flood in 1982 washed that poison into every home, yard, and playground. The EPA swooped in, and the tests confirmed everyone's worst fears. The town was unlivable. The government had to buy every single property, and the entire community was bulldozed and burned. A town erased by a mistake you couldn't even see. But sometimes, a ghost town isn't created by a hidden poison, but by a dream that was too big to survive. Number 4. Glen Rio. Imagine your entire town's survival depends on one single road. That was Glen Rio, a bustling little stop right on the border of Texas and New Mexico. For decades, it thrived on the traffic from the legendary Route 66. Its gas stations, diners, and motels were all powered by the constant flow of travelers. But the very thing that gave Glen Rio life is also what killed it: progress. When the massive, multi-lane Interstate 40 was built, it was designed for speed, not scenery. And it bypassed the town completely. Almost overnight, the stream of cars, and the money they brought, just vanished. The town's economic heart simply stopped beating. Glen Rio died a slow, quiet death, becoming a hollowed-out monument to a road the world left behind. It's a town that was simply forgotten. But our next ghost town wasn't forgotten. It was a place people were desperate to escape. Number 5. Kennecott. Imagine being told your job, your home, and your entire town will cease to exist on a specific date. That's exactly what happened in Kennecott, a town built for one single purpose: to mine one of the richest copper deposits ever discovered. Deep in the Alaskan wilderness, a powerful company built an entire city from scratch. They owned the houses, the hospital, the store, everything. For decades, it was a money-making machine, pulling over $200 million worth of copper from the mountains. But company towns have a fatal flaw. When the company leaves, the town dies. And that's what happened in 1938. The copper was gone, so the company just left. They announced a final date, and the last train rolled out of town, leaving Kennecott completely empty. It wasn't a slow decline. It was a switch being flipped off. But what happens when a town isn't abandoned by choice, but is literally torn apart by the earth itself? Number 6. Cahaba. This is what happens when a town is built in the absolute wrong place. Cahaba was designed to be Alabama's first permanent state capital, a grand city symbolizing the state's bright future. But they made one fatal mistake. They built it right where two major rivers come together. The town was plagued by flooding from day one. But the first killer wasn't the water. It was politics. Just 6 years after it was founded, the state decided to move the capital away, stripping Cahaba of its purpose. Still, the town held on. Until 1865. That year, a massive flood completely swallowed the city. The water rose so high that steamboats were reportedly navigating down the main street, rescuing people from the second floors of their own homes. It was a 1-2 punch. First abandoned by the government, then literally drowned by the rivers it was built on. But not every town is a victim of its environment. Sometimes, a town is destroyed by an idea. Number 7. Bannack. This is the story of a classic Wild West town, built on a fortune that was almost too good to be true. When gold was discovered in Bannack, Montana in the 1860s, it wasn't just any gold. The stuff they pulled out of Grasshopper Creek was nearly 100% pure. That kind of treasure attracts two kinds of people: fortune seekers and criminals. Bannack got both, and the town became so violent that regular citizens had to form their own vigilante groups just to survive. And here's the unbelievable twist. The man they elected sheriff, Henry Plummer, was secretly the leader of the most ruthless gang in town. When his double life was exposed, the townspeople didn't bother with a trial. They dragged Plummer and his men to the gallows themselves. Once the easy gold ran out, the town emptied just as fast as it had filled, leaving behind a perfectly preserved monument to frontier justice. But while Bannack was destroyed by human greed, some towns face a threat that is completely invisible. Number 8. Cisco. This is a story about a town that was killed by progress, not once, but twice. Located in the harsh Utah desert, Cisco's entire reason for existing was the railroad. In the age of steam, locomotives needed a ton of water to run, and Cisco was a vital service stop. The town's economy was built around keeping those trains moving. Then, The first blow landed. Railroads switched from steam to diesel engines. These new trains didn't need to stop for water, and just like that, Cisco's main purpose was gone. A few stubborn residents held on, finding new life-servicing cars on the nearby highways. But then came the second final blow. Interstate 70 was built. The new superhighway bypassed the town completely, cutting off its last trickle of customers. Cisco wasn't defeated by a disaster. It was just made obsolete. But some towns aren't forgotten because the world moves on. They're abandoned because of a dream that became a nightmare. Number 9. Rhyolite. This wasn't just another dusty mining camp. It was supposed to be the Queen City of Death Valley. In just 2 years, Rhyolite exploded from a couple of tents to a city of thousands. They weren't building for a quick buck. They were building to last. We're talking 3-story concrete banks, an opera house, a stock exchange, and homes made from thousands of glass bottles. It was a boom town built on the promise of endless gold and even more endless investment. But the dream was a bubble. It was fueled by pure speculation, and when the nationwide financial panic of 1907 hit, that bubble burst instantly. The outside money vanished, banks collapsed, and the mines, which were never as rich as promised, shut down. In less than a decade, the permanent city was a hollow shell. It proves that a town doesn't need a disaster to die. It just needs the money to disappear. But not every ghost town is an accident of history. Sometimes they are wiped off the map on purpose. Number 10. St. Elmo. This town wasn't destroyed by a disaster or a financial panic. It was killed by a single business decision. By the 1920s, the gold and silver mines around St. Elmo, Colorado were already starting to run dry. The town was fading, but it was still hanging on. The one thing keeping it connected to the outside world was the railroad that snaked through the mountains. Then, in 1926, the railroad company decided the route wasn't profitable anymore and simply ripped up the tracks. Just like that, St. Elmo was completely cut off. The population, which was once 2,000 strong, collapsed to fewer than 10 people. Today, it's one of America's most perfectly preserved ghost towns, with over 40 original buildings still standing. It's a stark, frozen-in-time reminder that sometimes, all it takes to erase a town is to cut its one and only lifeline. So, when we look at these towns, we see a pattern. They weren't just unlucky places. Often, the reason they vanished was simple. The money dried up, gold or silver mines ran out, or the big business that kept everyone employed just packed up and left. But sometimes, it was a sudden change, like a railroad disappearing and cutting off a town's only lifeline. Other times, it was huge environmental problems, some even caused by people, like the underground fire in Centralia that's been burning for decades. These towns aren't just old ruins. They're stark reminders of how quickly everything can change and how fragile our communities really are. These aren't just dusty relics or spooky tales. They're chilling reminders of how easily a town, a dream, an entire way of life can simply vanish. They force us to ask, what unseen forces are shaping our own communities right now? What are the real threats lurking just beneath the surface? If you want to keep peeling back the layers on these complex stories and understand the deeper patterns shaping our world, then make sure you subscribe. Stay with us as we continue to expose the hidden vulnerabilities and unexpected ends of places we thought would last forever.